and welcome to i24 News here in the Jaffa port. I'm Frank Melloul, the CEO of i24 News. With me is Kalev Ben David, the host of our news primetime edition, The Rundown. And I would like, before we dive in the very special show that we have prepared for you today, to give you some update about i24 News. I just came back from the Gulf after visiting Dubai, and I'm very enthusiastic to tell you and very excited that i24 News became a reference in the region, and more than that, an alternative of Al Jazeera for the people of the Middle East. Why? Because our DNA brought us to this amazing opportunity today to show the reality of a new Middle East. And what is the meaning for us of a new Middle East is to explain this new reality, including Israel and Arabic countries of the region. So before to give the floor to our friend, I would like first to show you a short clip explaining you what is the reality now for i24 News.
i24 News, the Altice Group International News TV network, is an amazing project. Unbiased international news coverage through the prism of the Middle East from the Middle East. Today, more than 1 billion households worldwide have access to i24 News. In just a few years, i24 News has become a global news network.
Bonsoir. Hello and welcome to Israel Business Weekly. تحية لكم مجددا مشاهدينا.
Today, i24 News employs 150 journalists from 35 different countries, from our offices in Tel Aviv, Paris, New York, Washington, and Los Angeles. Our team delivers the news to our audience in 3 languages: French, English, and Arabic.
I've always thought that this region in particular is often misunderstood, and it's our job as journalists to fix that.
مما لا شك فيه فإن هذا هو أفضل مكان لتحليل ولفهم الأخبار الدولية.
Things are happening here. When you look at the major news stories, you realize that almost everything starts from here.
i24 News is not only a non-stop news network, it also broadcasts daily shows and magazines to analyze and help our viewers understand the news, with guests from all backgrounds for open and unfiltered discussions.
Rendre compte des événements avec précision, sans tenir aux faits, rien d'autre, c'est ça qui fait la différence.
i24 News is available everywhere, on TV, web, apps, social media, and OTT.
We are working 24/7 to provide our audience with the most reliable information as fast as possible.
i24 News. See beyond.
And our first guest is my friend Richard Heideman, president of the American Zionist Movement, which consists of 35 national Jewish Zionist organizations and works across a broad ideological, political, and religious spectrum, linking the American Jewish community together in support of Israel, Zionism, and the Jewish people. Hi, my friend Richard, how are you?
Frank, thank you very much. It's so good on behalf of the American Zionist Movement and all 35 of our organizations, which, as you say, are from across the spectrum of American Jewish Zionist life, working together with respect, working together in dialogue, working together in action to make a difference in Israel, in the United States, and around the global Jewish world. We impact lives, we provide services, we provide care, we provide respect and dignity, and we provide the opportunity for people to come together at the table and exchange their views, challenge one another, and press us forward as one Jewish people. You know, you mentioned Frank, and Kalev has mentioned, you are in 35 countries now. We are now 35 strong Jewish Zionist organizations, our constituent members, our associates, and our Zionist youth organizations. thank you for hosting as our partner this third session of I24 News Spotlight on the American Zionist Movement.
Thank you, Richard. Always a pleasure to be with you. Our next guest joins us from Ameinu, which is Hebrew for our people. It's a national community of progressive Jews in North of America. Ameinu mobilizes those Jews who seek opportunities to foster social and economic justice both in Israel and in North America. Ameinu aims to build support within the North American Jewish community for a negotiated two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And we have now joining us Kenneth Bob, National President of Ameinu. Boker Tov, Kenneth.
Boker Tov, good to be with you.
Good. You have the floor.
Well, I'm happy to introduce Ameinu to your audience. Ameinu is a progressive Zionist organization built on a history of 110 years of labor Zionist activity in the United States. We have a wide range of activities. We do a lot of work on the ground in Israel. We organize regular study trips. We operate the Kibbutz Program Center, which sends young people to meaningful experiences in Israel. We're engaged with many social activist NGOs on the ground in Israel, both publicizing their activities here in the United States and also supporting them financially. We have a lot of advocacy activities centered in the United States. We've helped to form the Progressive Israel Network, which has given a unified voice for 10 organizations here in the US. We have managed campaigns around supporting a two-state solution, religious pluralism, opposing the occupation, and related issues. We have a very interesting initiative called The Third Narrative, which brings together over 200 affiliated liberal and progressive academics who've united to combat boycotts against Israel within academic associations. And within the Third Narrative, we also provide speakers and resources to students on campus to engage with the left around Israel. We have a very new initiative called Connect IL, which is a project which creates basically a meeting place for liberal young Israelis who live in the United States. We also are very active within the Israel national institutions, primarily the World Zionist Organization, the Jewish Agency, where we can work to promote our progressive Zionist agenda as well. We also maintain an active schedule of educational programs, both around the United States in various cities, and during this last year, of course, over Zoom. In fact, this past Sunday, we just launched our virtual Israel study trip with 2 full buses of people to learn about the issues and challenges that Israel faces today. So we remain a vibrant, progressive Zionist voice in the American Jewish community.
Right. I'd like to, again, ask that same question that I asked earlier, Ken, to Karen, about how coming out of the coronavirus that has influenced your planning towards the year ahead, because I'm sure this coming year is going to be quite different from this past year. And also, one of the things I really like about the AZM is, as Richard said, it's really a broad umbrella politically and ideologically, and you present a very different picture than our previous 2 speakers. So that same issue of how some of those changes politically in the U.S. and here in the Middle East may be impacting on your thinking and your agenda setting moving ahead.
On the first point of coming out of the coronavirus, we're obviously very excited about the opportunities to learn from the work we did during this pandemic and really utilize the technologies to continue to reach people. I mentioned we launched our virtual Israel study trip on Sunday, and frankly, it allows us to reach a large number of people who maybe can't travel to the region with us, but really want to dig into the issues, not just through what we call, Zoom panels, but really engage with people on the ground in Israel, have them lead us on virtual tours. So I think we'll continue to use some of those technologies. But of course, we're very excited to be able to send young people to Israel again on long-term programs, take our own trips to Israel as groups and as individuals, and go back to some of the really productive work we've done before the pandemic. Look, in terms of the political landscape, here in the United States, of course, we've had a electoral change that brought a new State Department and White House into play. We're working very closely with the Biden-Harris administration. We're realistic. We know that there's not going to be an immediate return, let's say, to negotiations between the Israelis and Palestinians, but we're thrilled that the Biden administration has already renewed USAID funding for people-to-people activities between Israelis and Palestinians, renewed funding. One of the brutal cuts of the Trump administration was the cut in funding to the East Jerusalem Hospital Network. That's been renewed. And there's just a whole new spirit about re-engaging with the Palestinians. And I think this is an important part, and we're very supportive of that effort. And of course, on the Iran front, the talks are going on right now in Vienna after the failed Trump policies of maximum pressure, which only brought Iran back closer to nuclear weapons. We're obviously supportive of the Biden administration in that regard. And the political situation in Israel is challenging for all of us, frankly. Wherever you are in the political spectrum, the fact that Israel has not been able to have a stable government and just finished a fourth election is troubling for all of us. And we hope that there is some potential now of a coalition, a national unity coalition, that hopefully can move Israel forward. Certainly on social issues. I think on the issues of negotiations with the Palestinians, any coalition that might arise would be challenging. But we're supportive of any move in Israel that can put a stable government together and get Israel back in a moving forward type profile.
All right, thank you.
I want to shift our focus now to the Baltimore Zionist District, an organization that used the direct Israeli connection as a home base for the creation of cultural and political programs and educational activities which deal with all aspects of Zionism and modern Israeli life. This is what they are about. Just a clip. Joining us now is Karen Levine, Executive Director at Baltimore Zionist District.
Karen, this is Caleb Ben David. I think we want to hear from you a little now in your own words about your organization after that very, very brief clip.
So thank you for having me. First of all, it's wonderful to be here. A little bit about the Baltimore Zionist District. Like you said, we are based in Baltimore, Maryland. Though we are based in Baltimore, we do a lot of work with many organizations. We partner with many global organizations. Our main focus is to connect the Baltimore community with the state of Israel through programs, through advocacy, through speakers. We really deal a lot with anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, Holocaust denial, and we really focus on bringing the Jewish community as close as possible to the state of Israel, even though we're so far away from the state of Israel.
Right, and I think, Karen, I want to ask as a follow-up question to you and all of the organization leaders gathered today. You know, as a journalist, when I look at the past year, there's really two big stories. One is the coronavirus pandemic. And of course, all of your organizations deal with the connection between the United States and Israel. You run Israel trips, Israel programs. All of that has been impacted during the past year by the pandemic. Now that things are opening up, certainly in Israel, starting to, I'm curious to see how that is affecting your planning to the year ahead, a sort of renewal. The other thing, if you want to address it, is this has been a year of dramatic political changes in the U.S., here in this region with the Abraham Accords, with some of the changes in Israel, and if that is also in any way impacting on, you know, your planning, you're setting your agenda towards the year ahead. So either or both of those, if you want to just tackle that.
Sure. So in terms of the trips and things that we do, We do run a large team trip every year to Israel, which we have not done for the past 2 years. But what we have done is we've done, obviously, I think like every other organization, is Zoom programming, which we started last March when we packed up our bags and our computers here in the office. And we've run 65 Zoom trips since last March. And they've encompassed everything from live trips to Israel, to live trips to Vienna, to Paris, to everywhere that you could possibly imagine. So that's been incredible. We started with 22 participants on our first Zoom, and up to 750 on our last Zoom. So that's really grown, which is incredible. We're just now getting back to our first live program, which will be for Shavuot, which we're really excited about, with a maximum of 20 participants. We don't have planned for a trip to Israel just yet, but it is something that we'll be looking to possibly in the spring of next year. In terms of political events, we do have a great event coming up called the New Middle East, as I think you were discussing earlier today, with a group called Sharaka. That's actually coming up on Thursday, a panel discussion with representatives from the UAE, Bahrain, and Israel. So we're really looking forward to that discussion, moderated by myself, with questions coming in from our members. So we're really looking forward to that event.
All right, it sounds like a great event. Karen, thank you for that.
Thank you, Karen. Our next guest is joining us from Herut North America, an organization committed to the creation of social, economic, and political conditions conducive to successfully integrating all Jews in the ancestral homeland of Israel. Joining us now is Jeff Dunetz, National Board Member at Herut North of America. Good morning, Jeff.
Boker Tov, how are you?
We are fine. You have the floor.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Herut.
Please.
Okay, we base our organization on the principles of Zev Jabotinsky. And what those principles, at least to us, are obviously unapologetic Zionism, and I'll get to that in a second, education, and uniting all Jews. And what we mean by uniting all Jews is that our members, and we encourage our members, are representatives of all flavors of Judaism, from Orthodox to conservative to Reform to even secular. Okay, if you're Jewish and you believe in the Jewish homeland of Israel, you're welcome in our organization. Okay, education. Herut is big on creating and distributing educational materials. We used to have a lot of seminars all across the United States. However, obviously with the pandemic, we're kind of limited to being in our own domiciles. So what we do is we replace that with writing. Okay, we've done things like we created a synagogue security kit, meaning a booklet explaining what you should do to protect your shul from outside attacks. That was done right after we had a problem, especially in New York, with people attacking shuls. But we've gone further than that. We've done, for each Jewish holiday, we explain how it attaches to Zionism. We urged people to become Maccabees to join our organization because the Maccabees were trying to protect the Jewish state of then Judea, but we're trying to protect the Jewish state of Israel. So we do booklets and materials for each Jewish event and distribute it to shuls, to organizations, etc. What we also do is that, what I mean by unapologetic Zionism is, and this is actually one of my favorite quotes from Jabotinsky, something he wrote 110 years ago, which I understand I might have had hair back then, but what he wrote was that our habit of constantly and zealously answering to any rabble that has already done us harm and will do us much more. We don't need to apologize for anything. We are a people as are other peoples, and we do not have any intentions to be better than the rest. Okay, what we do is what we do, guys, and we have, we have the best intentions as part of it. We don't need to account to anybody. We don't need to sit for any examination. Nobody is old enough to know all the answers. What we're here for is to be actually to be good for the Jews.
Right.
And one of the first things in the Torah is that, well, at least in Bereshit, God tells Abraham he's going to build from him a great nation. So the Jewish people are not only a faith, but it's a great nation. And that great nation is Israel. Okay, and what we're doing is the miracle of restarting the Jewish state after 2,000 years. Okay, so in our humble opinion, okay, it is every Jew's obligation to be a Zionist. And that's basically what Jabotinsky was saying. And he was writing it when my grandparents were leaving Odessa by running across the roofs to come to the United States. Okay, so the other thing that, at least, and forgive me, but this is something that I've been writing for a long time, is my favorite Jabotinsky quote, which says, "It's incredible what political simpletons Jews are. We always shut our eyes to one of the most elementary rules of life, that you must not meet halfway to those who do not want to meet you." Okay, so we try to protect the Zionist thought, the Zionist population.
Thank you, Jeff, for delivering this message of unity. Join us now from the organization Partners for Progressive Israel, an organization dedicated to the achievement of a durable and peaceful relationship between the State of Israel and its neighbors. Partners promotes a just Israeli society by cultivating Jewish-Arab partnership and seeks to design American Jews' understanding of the complexities of both Israeli and Palestinian societies. Play the clip, please.
Partners for Progressive Israel is a progressive American Zionist nonprofit dedicated to the achievement of a durable and just peace between Israel and its neighbors, including an end to Israel's occupation based on a two-state solution. Partners supports Israelis working to ensure social justice, civil rights, and equality. We promote a just Israeli society by cultivating Jewish-Arab partnerships and seek to deepen American Jews' understandings of the complexities of Israeli and Palestinian societies. In our monthly webinar series, we bring voices from Israel and Palestine to our American audience. Our Women's Initiative challenges outdated narratives and infuses hope into unresolved on-the-ground conditions. In our Kolot program, we share stories of cooperative endeavors in Israel and Palestine. Our yearly symposium provides a unique experience of Israeli and Palestinian societies and progressive politics in an intense guided tour.
Joining us now, Ron Skonik, Programming and Communication Partners for Progressive Israel. Good morning, Ron.
Good morning.
Please tell us about your organization.
Well, Partners for Progressive Israel is actually a very veteran organization that has its origins in the period at the founding of the State of Israel and right after. It's an educational organization that tries to inform Americans, and Jewish Americans in particular, of the complexities of Israeli, and we're increasingly trying to look at Palestinian society. And we do that through a multiplicity of ways, whether that's the annual trip to Israel and Palestine, known as the Israel Symposium, which last year was held virtually, and we hope to have that being done in person when conditions allow. Whether that's our bi-monthly magazine, it's an e-zine, Israel Horizons, which used to appear as a hard copy, and it went the way of a lot of hard copy publications around the world, but we're continuing to put it out every 2 months, and that has a lot of fascinating original articles. It's not a newsletter, it's an article where a magazine where we bring in viewpoints from Israel and Palestine. We featured this current month a piece on an argument for a equal and symmetrical Jewish-Arab party in Israel. We had a piece from Military Court Watch about the mechanisms for enforcing the occupation. So it's a great read for people who want to take a deep dive. We engage in webinars called Conversations with Israel and Palestine, where we seek to look into viewpoints that a lot of Jewish Americans don't hear all the time, and take a deeper analytical approach at a lot of topics, from Israel and Iran to the possibilities of an Israel-Palestine confederation. And we do organizational profiles. We do a series called Kolot, Voices of Hope. And as the name suggests, we're looking for, Americans see so much despair in Israel and Palestine. There are a lot of people on the ground doing really important work, Jews and Arabs together on both sides of the Green Line. And we feature that in pieces on organizations like the Ajial Youth Movement in Israel, which works with Hashomer Hatzair, the Negev Coexistence Forum, to name a few. And we have a new initiative which just started this year called the Women's Initiative, which is focusing on the need to address women's rights issues in Israel, which is still a very important need.
Right, Ron. I have to say, after listening to all our guests today, I realize how much why the AZM is such a good fit for i24 News, because like AZM, we try to allow, especially in the Jewish community, the entire ideological and political spectrum have a platform in which they can express their views and they can dialogue, sometimes viewpoints that, like you say, the mainstream, be it either on the right or the left, are not covered in mainstream media or mainstream Jewish media. And I think we're running the gamut certainly here today. So I'm going to follow up also with you, how you see the developments of the past year impacting on the mission, developments in Israel and in the region and in the U.S. impacting on your mission to get out your particular political ideological viewpoint and goals that you've set.
Well, in a kind of ironic sense, almost, I think that the heightened awareness around the push for annexation helped us sort of make a point that I think was harder for people over the years to hear, which is that settlement and annexation and potential annexation are really one and the same. Settlements aren't there for any other reason than to lay claim to an area that needs to be that's occupied and that needs to be part of a permanent settlement, and the vast majority of which will need to be part of a Palestinian state. So while we were obviously dismayed and we joined the pushback against plans for de jure annexation last year, in a kind of ironic way, I think this brought things to a head and made a lot of people realize what the two real alternatives are. And obviously, we're delighted that didn't happen. But we don't want folks to think that's, just because the legal step of annexation is now on pause or on hold, that the actual act of de facto annexation, of laying claim to the area through settlements and roads for settlers only, people think that that's disappeared. And I think people have gained a heightened awareness and a greater sensitivity to what's going on day by day.
Right. Thanks, Ron. I'll just say that I'm sorry we don't have more time to have I think we could have a great discussion and debate here with the guests, but I think we'll have to leave that to my program, The Rundown. But it was great hearing this to such a diverse viewpoints and opinions just in this gathering here today.
Vision is an organization committed to identifying and achieving the next objective of Jewish history. Here is a little bit about them.
The Zionist movement successfully gathered the Jewish people home to the land of Israel, revived the Hebrew language, and established the first independent Jewish state in thousands of years. But what's next? The Vision movement is a coalition of grassroots organizations committed to defining the current objectives of Jewish liberation and inspiring a new vision for our current chapter of Israel's story. Our educational programs empower Jewish students and young professionals to become active characters in the story of their people. We challenge participants to define the goals of Jewish history, what's already been achieved, what remains to be accomplished, and what obstacles stand in the way. Our mission is to create a critical mass of young Jewish leaders equally committed to Jewish liberation and to the liberation of all peoples in order to show up as their full selves for struggles against injustice. Following our return home from exile and the re-establishment of Jewish independence after nearly 2,000 years, the State of Israel is a work in progress, with many policies, structures, and even foundational ideas in need of repair. Recognizing that narrow Jewish nationalism can only bring the Jewish people so far, we work to formulate a uniquely Hebrew Universalist vision that could protect Zionism's positive achievements while addressing and rectifying its flaws. As we build a vibrant and inclusive movement of young adults committed to formulating new ideas and ideological vehicles for advancing the story of our people, Vision aims to empower the next generation's most dedicated leaders with the tools and means to become active participants in the Jewish story. You could learn more about the Vision movement and our work at visionmovement.org.
Joining us now is Rabbi Yehuda Cohen, educator in the Vision movement. Good morning, Rabbi.
Hi, how are you? Good afternoon.
We are fine here in Tel Aviv. So please tell us about more about your organization.
The Vision movement is really working to empower students and young professionals to formulate their own Jewish liberation ideology. You know, Zionism was a very successful movement in terms of bringing the Jewish people back to life, rebuilding our body, achieving material liberation, but our revolution isn't over. And our young people need to realize that and need to be able to, they need to be given the tools to be able to formulate for themselves what the next goals of Jewish history are and how they can play a meaningful role in achieving those objectives.
Rabbi Cohen, I want to again ask the same question about coming out of the coronavirus, which for you involves not just, the impact on your activities, not only between Israel diaspora, but here in Israel. I know you have the Beit Midrash in Jerusalem, I believe. So it's impacted, I'm sure, the past year. Looking forward to the year ahead, some of your plans and objectives coming out. And also the same question about how the changes politically, ideologically, I think for your group especially, more the regional changes are perhaps the ones that are set, the impacting on how you see the future and setting your agenda going forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, in terms of Corona, it did, like most organizations, force us to move many of our activities online, which was initially a little bit challenging, but actually turned out to be quite fruitful because we were able to open up a lot of our educational programs that had previously been limited to students in the Jerusalem area to Jews all over the world. And we ended up having much larger programs that just happened to be on Zoom instead of in person.
and also what I said about briefly about some of the changes. It's been a year of very dramatic politics, both in Israel, but also in the larger Middle East. We were talking a lot about the Abraham Accords and how you see that could sort of impact on, the message that you're trying to convey to the next generation, how that influences your thinking about how you're conveying that message.
Well, to be honest, I'm not sure we can really achieve the, I would say, whether we want to call it, we'd like to see Israel as an organic part of the region, obviously. We want Israel to, after 2,000 years, to be able to re-indigenize into the Semitic region. Obviously, we support good relations between Israel and our neighbors, but I don't think the Palestinians can be circumvented. I think we're going to need to reconcile with the Palestinians and find a solution for our country that really works for both of us before we can count on real regional normalization or inclusion.
All right. Thank you very much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. We are moving now to the Zionist Organization of America, the oldest pro-Israel organization in the United States. The ZOA is dedicated to educating the public, elected officials, media like us, and college, high school students about the truth of the ongoing and relentless Arab war against Israel. Let's watch the clip.
ZOA is the only organization that has credibility with the administration in Washington, with the administration in Jerusalem, with the media.
Because of ZOA's campaigns, harsh critics of Israel were denied their official post that they were going to have.
ZOA is focused on the safety, security, survival, and continuity of the State of Israel and the Jews in the United States.
They need the help of ZOA. They need to know that their thinking on Israel is not wrong. They need to know that they can't be bullied because they support Israel.
I believe we are the most important pro-Israel organization in the United States. I wish there were 10 ZOAs, but there's only one.
Zionism has sometimes become a negative word or a dirty word, and it's so far from the truth. There is one Jewish state in the entire world. If people think that the Jewish people could survive in the current environment and climate without the Jewish state of Israel, they're sadly mistaken. ZOA is needed more now than ever. We need your help, we need your support, we need your involvement.
Joining us now is Mark Levinson, chairman of Zionist Organizations of America. Boker Tov from Tel Aviv, Mark.
Tzarayim Tov, Ani Choshev.
That's right.
Please, Mark, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm proud to be here, proud to speak on behalf of the Zionist Organization of America. The ZOA is the oldest pro-Israel organization in the United States, established in 1897. We have a proud history of truly illustrious leaders, including U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis, Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver, and our current president, Morton Klein. In our early days, we played a key role in securing American support for establishing the Jewish state of Israel. Since then, we've been unrelenting in standing up strongly for a safe and secure Israel and for the rights of the Jewish people. We do this in the media, through our articles, letters, op-eds, and television appearances. Our professionals lecture at universities, high schools, synagogues, and other venues. We do this on Capitol Hill, where our government relations department meets with lawmakers across the political spectrum to advocate on issues that help our people and encourage strong U.S.-Israel relations. We do this through our Center for Law and Justice, where we use the law and the legal system to fight against anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias and safeguard the rights of the Jewish people. And we also do this through our campus department. Our campus coordinators are on the ground working with college students across the country to build their knowledge about Israel, to help them respond to campus anti-Semitism in all forms, and help them become strong, confident, and effective advocates for the Jewish state of Israel. It was a ZOA that understood that campus anti-Semitism was a serious problem, and we used the law to address it at a time when other Jewish groups minimized the problem or denied that campus anti-Semitism was a problem at all. The ZOA filed a groundbreaking legal action under a federal law called Title VI of the Civil Rights Act to compel a federally funded university to address the harassment and threats that Jewish students were being subjected to. Disgracefully, not only did other Jewish groups, fail to support this legal effort, some actively and publicly opposed it. But the ZOA was not deterred. We led the battle that ultimately resulted in a clear government policy declaring that Jewish students are protected under Title VI, a protection that other ethnic and racial groups have been enjoying for close to 50 years. The ZOA has helped so many students at schools around the U.S., and we continue to do so. More recently, we established a young professionals group to keep young people interested and engaged on Israel-related issues after they've completed their schooling. ZOA also has strong and influential regional offices around the United States. They run programs and work with their respective regions to educate people, encourage activism, and build grassroots support for Israel. Last but not least, we have an office in Israel which helps strengthen the bond between our two countries. Our Israel office provides information about ZOA's activities to the Israeli public and to lawmakers and officials as well. And we serve as a conduit for important information and news from Israel. In short, we make sure that the ZOA's voice is heard everywhere it's needed.
Mark, I just follow up on that question, same one. We have a couple more minutes, what I asked Karen. How do you see some of these political developments in the U.S., maybe here in Israel or even in the region, as either presenting more of a challenge for your organization or for maybe in some ways helping convey your messages?
Well, look, clearly our views were not only aligned with the previous administration, we were so instrumental in the efforts and achievements on the issues relating to the Israel embassy, declaring Jerusalem the capital of Israel, Golan Heights, defunding UNRWA, closing the PLO mission. Those were all things that really we were so proud and pleased to be involved in. The UAE Accords, the signing of the UAE Accords on the White House lawn, Mort Klein and I were both there. These were tremendous accomplishments and really gave us great gratification for the work we were doing. But, you know, we go with the flow. And now we have another administration, and we're going to continue to fight for Israel in all the venues and avenues that we do. What I think makes the ZOA unique is really the sheer breadth of our work, which makes us among the most effective and influential pro-Israel organizations around. We're constantly in the media. We're in regular communication with lawmakers on Capitol Hill about issues critical to Israel and the Jewish community. We run yearly advocacy missions to Washington, D.C., with ZOA activists from across the country, meet with lawmakers and the staffers. Even during this COVID period, we do what we can with Zoom. We've had hundreds and hundreds of Zoom sessions, book clubs, speeches, conferences, all on Zoom, and it's all been terrific. And people are engaged and enjoy seeing it. So we meet with the lawmakers and the staffers. We educate and influence them on issues that benefit U.S. and Israel and strengthen the U.S.-Israel alliance. We have a legal center. That work doesn't stop. We have a campus department and a group for young professionals. We have regional offices around the country, and we have an office in Israel. And we will, this summer, we will get back to running our one-of-a-kind trips to Israel for both college students and adults. ZOA is engaging, educating, and influencing so many people across the political spectrum, both here in the U.S. and in Israel. But the second point that I really want to stress here, the second reason that the ZOA is so unique and is needed and makes me so proud of our work is that it's our fearlessness and our commitment to telling the truth and acting on the truth. For example, as you probably well know, the ZOA has been a strong and vocal advocate for American victims of terrorism. It was the ZOA that initiated and fought for the passage of the Kobe Mandel Act, which created an office in the U.S. Department of Justice to capture and prosecute terrorists who have harmed or murdered Americans overseas.
Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
That concludes our special broadcast. I would like to thank personally my friend Richard. You want to add something before we are closing, Richard?
Frank, Kalev, you've seen again today the diversity of the American Zionist movement, organizations with different views. They have their own views. They have their right to express their views. And what we seek to do at the American Zionist movement is provide one table, one round table, so that those views can be shared and aired with respectful dialogue. And airing means partnerships like we have with i24 News. We salute what you are doing around the world, bringing people together from all walks of life, sharing with them the beauty of Israel, the people of Israel, the state of Israel, the future of Israel, and sharing with them the strength and the beauty of the Abraham Accords. Frank, Kalev, we salute i24 News. We thank you for your partnership with the American Zionist Movement, and we thank you for having conducted with us these spotlights on the various organizations of the American Zionist Movement.
Thank you, Richard. Definitely, we are sharing the same DNA, the DNA of diversity and the DNA of coexistence, we can say. So thank you very much for joining us here on i24 News from the Jaffa Port. I'm Frank Melloul, the CEO of i24 News, here with Kalev Ben David, one of the face of i24 News, and see you tonight on your show, Kalev.
I hope everyone will tune in if they can.